This is episode 106 of The Variety Artist. This is John Abrams, your host, and that guy that interviews successful variety artists from around the world every single week. Do you want to be successful? Roman philosopher Seneca said, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. But race car driver Bobby Unser said, success is where preparation and opportunity meet. My guest today is living proof of that. You're going to hear how he's parlayed his successes to create a full career. Lots of lessons in this one. In fact, there's lots of lessons in all the Variety Artist podcasts. Now's the time to catch up on any you've missed. Go back and listen. Heck, the price is right. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to The Variety Artist, providing aspiring artists and entertainers with in-depth discussions from top performers from all over the world. So get ready to book some gigs, make some money, and have some fun with your host, John Abrams.
From the streets to the stage, all the way to national television, he's accomplished quite a lot along his magical journey. It wasn't easy, though. There were many challenges, including the most difficult one yet, carpal tunnel syndrome. Variety artist, I give you Shaun Jay.
All right, John, thank you. This is great.
I'm excited about you being on, my friend.
Yeah, I'm happy that you're having me and giving me a chance to share my voice with the wonderful world of variety artists.
Well, I got to tell you, you sent me a magazine, and it was autographed, the MUM magazine, and you are on the cover of it, and you sent me an autographed copy of it. This is one of the best promotional pieces I've ever gotten. I get videotapes and I get links to videos and things, but I've seen all the magic. You know, I've seen Lincoln Ring Routine. I've seen Sponge Balls. I've seen all those things so many times. But when I receive something unique like this, I think it's terrific. And that's obviously the reason I called you. So it's great.
It's pretty awesome. And it was great that Rory and the team gave me a chance to share my story with all the magicians around the world. It's very thankful for it. Happy that you got some value out of it.
Well, how did you get on the cover of MUM? Did you get a phone call, or how did that come about?
The man who writes the stories, Rory Johnston, he's known about me and I've known about him for at least 10 years. I was one of the original interns at the Magic Live convention. He let me work behind the scenes, and I got a chance to meet some amazing legends in magic and learned a whole heck of a lot along the way. And so he kind of knew me, knew my work ethic, knew what I stood for. And we were talking one day, and he's like, "Hey, Shaun, have you ever been on the cover of any of these magic magazines?" I was like, "No." He said, "Well, do you want to?" I said, "Yeah."
You're like, no, don't put my face on the cover of a very famous magazine.
Nah. Yeah, I was just like, keep me out of that. You know, I just want to remain anonymous. But then he convinced me, and he said it'd be a good idea. And he really pulled my arm about it. And then I said, "Oh, all right." It actually wasn't like that.
Yeah.
He was kind enough to ask, and I just said that would be wonderful. And so he said, let's talk about your story. What's your story? Let's take it from ground zero all the way to now. That's what we did.
Well, it's an excellent article. I just read the whole thing just a couple hours ago. It's terrific.
It's all true too. I can't believe it. Like when I read it, it's like, really, did all that happen? Yes, it did.
And you're young. Well, how old are you?
I just turned 29.
It's amazing.
I literally can't believe it myself. I can, in the sense that I've always set my bar really high. People have told me that I never acted my age. I always acted like somebody much, much older. And that my expectations were always so high. I was kind of like a perfectionist. And then I've kind of let that mindset go a little bit, just because it can be pretty maddening. It certainly does pave the way for motivation for success. And you know, it doesn't hurt to have high goals and aspirations.
Yeah. And one of the things that I noticed about you is that you're leveraging your success. Like you get on the cover of a magazine, you send it to me, I post it on my Facebook, you get on this podcast, you've leveraged all that success. And that's the same with some of your national TV things. I noticed on your website that you're using some of the national TV videos for your website.
Why not? I mean, it does more good for the world if people see it than it just being there and nobody knows about it. It's important.
It also seems to be a good way to succeed even more. If you have some success, you know, you're building on your successes.
one thing always leads to another. It's one big domino effect. The faster you can roll that snowball and build that snowball up, the greater the chances of that snowball keeps rolling and rolling. The faster it rolls, the harder it is to stop.
Well, let's go back then. Let's go back to your very beginnings, because your beginnings are similar to mine.
Oh,
Started at a
okay.
library, I was reading.
Well, I was 12 years old, and I probably was, I was actually a little younger than that. 12 is when it really kind of, the light bulb switched on in my brain that this is what I wanted to do. But I probably was like maybe 9 or 10, and I would visit the library. And before I was into magic, I was into drawing. I would do lots of detail pencil drawings. I would just sit in the library and I would just draw. I would draw comics and cartoons and look at people, kind of like people watch and draw their faces, taking in everything that was going on and expressing that through my drawing.
Yeah.
I checked out drawing books, and then somewhere I stumbled upon the magic book section, like all of us who did this at the library do. And then we just go, wow, this is really cool. What is this all about?
Yeah.
Remember, as I funneled into it, I was doing like a drawing, and I worked on a drawing for a while. I went over and like checked out these magic books, and I saw all of this sleight of hand with cards, and I couldn't believe it. I thought it was all impossible, and it just didn't look like anybody could do stuff like that. And I came up with my own way of doing it. And to summarize, basically my mom would drop me off and she would say, okay, Shaun, I'll be back in an hour. Be ready for me. I said, okay. And I would sit on the floor cross-legged in between the aisles of library books. And I would have like at least 10 books, like just scattered all over the floor, just looking at everything, practicing. She'd come back an hour later. She said, okay, Shaun, you ready? And I said, wait. Let me get the books together. I haven't finished. And she said, okay, I'll come back in another hour. And another hour passed, and I went back into my inner world of study and just geeking out on these books. She came back. She said, oh, you're still there? I thought you were supposed to be ready. Okay, I'll come back in another hour. And this went on for like 4 hours. And then she finally said, look, it's 8:00 at night. We got to go home.
You still have the books out?
Yeah. Then I had this like 4-foot high stack of books that was taller than me, trying to carry it over to the checkout. And I checked out all these books, and then I would take them to my room. And what do you know? 4 more hours, I'd be in there practicing in front of the mirror, isolating myself. And that was my world for a long while.
That's wild. Where did you transition from studying all your books to all of a sudden, I think I'll try actually performing in front of people?
I learned some basic stuff in the library books, and then I kind of tested it out on her.
Because your family loves it when you perform for them, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they were begging me to perform.
Oh, I'm sure.
Those card tricks, that was the thing. I mean, they said, please just show me another card trick, because that's what everybody wants. It's more card tricks. That's what we want to see. So my mom was cool enough to recognize that there was something that existed, and she knew that it excited me. And she said, well, let me see if I could find a place that sells magic props and magic books and things like that, like for professionals.
Yeah.
And so she took me to a local magic store, and I got some actual legit props. Like I got some sponge balls, I got some delights, I had a regular deck of cards. I started off on the Amar tapes, actually, Easy to Master Card Miracles.
Sure. For people that are listening to this that are not magicians, Michael Amar is the top teacher in the world, top magic teacher in the world.
He's the guy. He's the guy that's inspired so many, and I'm grateful for those tapes. And so I learned a couple of classics, got out my sponge balls, got out my delights. And then after I picked up this pro stuff, my mom again came to bat with a great idea. She's like, there's like these local art festivals nearby where we live. It's like First Friday or Last Friday, whatever they're called. And I brought a sandwich table, just a small little table, and set up. She kind of encouraged me along, and I set up. I put a tip jar on the table, and I just started doing card tricks.
About how old are you at the time?
Literally 12 years old.
Okay.
I just did what I felt was the way to do it. And people, they either one, felt sorry for me, or two, felt that it was such a novel thing to see this really young kid. And I didn't look 12 at the time either. I looked like I was about 8.
Oh, look at this 8-year-old doing all this cool magic.
That's how I started. I started literally as a street performer.
And then did you end up working for that magic shop?
I ended up, yes. The owner was kind enough to invite me to work behind the counter and demo stuff, help with inventory, clean up shop. That's what I remember doing. And this was when I was 12. So I was too young to get paid a proper salary. So he just said, well, if you work X amount of hours, that will equal this amount of dollars, and you can use that as like shop credit. And so that's how I bought my props and my books and my videos, more Amar tapes, a lot of Jeff McBride tapes.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about Jeff McBride and all your different mentors, because you've had a lot of good mentors, and I'm reading these names and they're very impressive. And we're going to get to that in just 1 second.
Okay.
But first, I'm going to ask you about your Harry Potter lookalike stuff.
Oh, that, yes.
Oh, that. Oh.
Yeah, you're digging deep. So, I was 12 years old, 13, 14. I think right when I started, actually, 12, 13, a lot of people were saying, oh, you do magic, but you know what? You look a lot like that Harry Potter guy. Have you ever seen Daniel Radcliffe? Have you ever seen those movies? And at the time, I really wasn't even like up on these movies with Harry Potter. And I said, well, maybe I should check it out.
Yeah.
And I did. And sure enough, I really kind of looked a lot like him at that age. I looked like the first Harry Potter.
Yeah, the young Harry Potter.
At that age, I had the same kind of Beatles haircut and the impish face. Didn't look my age either. It just kind of worked out. Let's get the costume together. Let's get the glasses. Let's get the scar on the forehead.
So what kind of things did you do as Harry Potter? I read that you worked with Kevin James, and
I didn't work directly with Kevin James. He got a request for a Harry Potter lookalike. And of course, Kevin James doesn't look anything like Harry Potter. He looks like Kevin James. What Kevin did was, Kevin is friends with Jeff McBride. And so Kevin was like, hey, Jeff, do you know of anybody that fits the bill? Maybe one of your students, I don't know. So at that time, it was like right after I met Jeff for the first time, when I was like 13, I think. And then Jeff said to Kevin, oh, I have this young student. His name is Shaun. He looks a lot like Harry Potter. You might want to send these photos of him to the agent and see what she says. And so we got back to Jeff. We gave him photos. He passed along to Kevin. Kevin sent it to the agent. The agent's like, wow, this is a perfect fit. It was a strolling walk-around lookalikes at a thing called Cagney Night. James Cagney, the movie guy.
Oh, yeah.
And there were different, quote, movie stars, like a fake Sylvester Stallone, a Marilyn Monroe.
A Harry Potter.
Me, of course, a Harry Potter.
Yeah.
The bonus with me was I was actually a real wizard. I could do real magic. It was great.
So, well, let's talk about your mentors then. We start out with Jeff McBride. Most people listening to this know who he is. He's one of also the top magic teachers in the world, but probably one of the best magicians in the world.
We started the Magic and Mystery School. That is like the real life Hogwarts for muggles and beginner, intermediate, and advanced magicians alike. Took a master class. I think my first master class was when I was 13. That really opened up a whole new world, going from the beginner library books to seeing all of the deeper subtleties of magic, the real pro tips from somebody who's been there and done that.
Well, that's the mystery school. And then you also worked with Gazzo?
True.
True.
Yeah, it's true.
Because you've worked with so many great guys. I mean, so how did that all come about?
That's an interesting story. So I was working at the magic shop. Because I was in charge of inventory, I would see everything that would come in and come out. So part of the inventory sorting job was making sure all the books were in the right order on the shelf. New things would come in. Things had to get shifted around. And I remember looking at the bookshelf, looking at the section of lecture notes. I liked the lecture notes back then because they were shorter than the books and they kind of got to the point quicker and they had more pictures. So I happened to see some lecture notes that said something like Gazzo on the cups and balls, because that's what he's known for.
Yeah.
I just was fascinated by what he looked like, what he was standing for, and the routine with all the oranges and the melon. I thought that was really fascinating. So I took those lecture notes off the shelf and, again, just kind of sat on the floor cross-legged, just in my usual position, and went through the entire set of notes. And I was like, I got to get this. So I bought them, and I just started studying and started learning the cups and balls. I just really like Gazzo's particular routine because it fit in a lot of the really rough, imperfect performing conditions that I was doing. And I just liked the fact that it covered a lot of the angles, and it kind of took a different turn than most routines. After reading the whole thing, all I said was, I got to meet this guy. This guy is really fascinating. Somehow I got his email address. I think I scoured the Magic Cafe or something and found his email address. And I started emailing him to get a pouch, the poacher's pouch that goes around your waist that holds all the stuff. What happened was I emailed him, saved up, because I was street performing at the time. I saved up. They're not cheap. And I waited, and I bought one. And then I started doing the routine, and I was okay at it. And then he said, this was in an email conversation, I'm doing a class. It's just like a one-on-one. You got to come down. The thing is, though, you got to come down to Key West, and we'll spend like 10 days together, and I'll show you everything. And that was a dream come true for me. And so I jumped on that. I convinced my mom to somehow figure that out. At the time, I was very lucky. At the time, my cousin had a condo down there, and she would let people rent it. And so it just so coincided with times that the condo was open, and ended up to where we stayed, because Key West is not a cheap place to stay. We made it work. We figured out how to make it work. And I studied with Gazzo, and
wow,
what a life-changing experience. That's what I remember saying. It was like Busker Boot Camp. That's really what it was.
Were you watching him perform on the street, or were you actually working with him, or what were you doing?
Both.
Oh.
I first watched him work. I would watch him work during the sunset. We would come back, decompress everything that happened, and talk about it. Talked about the philosophy of street performing, the philosophy of the hat line, the philosophy of drawing an edge, getting crowd, doing the show, keeping their attention, passing the hat. It's this whole science and philosophy. Then he said, okay, Shaun, I'm going to give you a crack at it. You're going to go out here to Mallory. You're going to put your name in the draw, and don't expect to get a good spot because you haven't been, you're just a newbie. Set up a table and did some of the most humbling shows of my entire life. What it is it's like a fishbowl, in the sense that you have at least, I don't know, I would say 7 to 10 performers, all kind of smushed into a very small space. Each one has his or her own spot, but everybody has to take turns. Only the strong survive. Whoever can get a crowd first goes first, and then you got to wait for that person to do their show. And then once they finish, the next person's got to start up, and it's kind of like whoever gets a crowd next. If you're last, you might get the least amount of money because everybody spent all their money going all the way down, viewing all the acts.
That's right.
Very difficult. But Gazzo, man, he figured out how to do it. He was there for quite some time, and his advice was golden. So I'm very thankful to have studied with him. It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, what about Paul Harris?
So I met Paul at Magic Live, actually. Yeah, we just got into a casual conversation, and I kind of told him what I was doing. I was doing more street performing at the time, and he was kind of impressed by that. He's like, wow, how's that working out for you? That's really difficult. Most people can't make a living doing that. And I said, well, I got a chance to study with Gazzo, and I've been working my home pitch, and at that particular time, it was really good. So he kind of respected that. We started talking about close-up magic. By the time I met Paul in 2009, I had already gotten a few of his books, and I studied those things religiously. I got them from the magic shop where I was working, and I just read those front to back, and I knew all the names of the effects and kind of the plots and the premise. And I was basically speaking his language, and he was pretty impressed that this youngster kind of knew all about his published literature and was actually doing the stuff. And one thing led to another, and then, we just kind of kept in touch. Eventually, he started asking my advice and my opinion on some of the effects that he was producing and coming out with. And I was more than flattered to be asked by Paul to, these questions. I was really surprised. I was like, why do you want my opinion? There's a lot of other people. And he just said, well, I know you're working the streets, you're busking, you're doing close-up magic, you're doing all these different types of gigs, you're doing restaurants. So I think that you probably have a pretty good realistic view and realistic feedback of new effects that we're trying to break in. He wanted to make sure that nothing that he was coming out with was a pipe dream. And so he would pass it to me to put it through the real world test first before it went to market. I would get the prototype. He has somebody else that he works with who's very talented, who takes Paul's idea from his mind and makes it into an actual real working prototype. And then that real working prototype was sent to me, and then I would take it out and perform it on gigs. And then I would kind of report back and say, hey, this is what worked, this is what didn't, this part of the gimmick held up, this part was falling apart, we got to fix this. And then I would send it back to the R&D guy, and he'd fix it, and we'd go through many, many variations until finally we all agreed on something that was beautiful enough to release to the public. He taught me just that a lot of people stop thinking too soon, and they give up on a problem because they think they know how it works, or they think that's the finished version. But working with Paul taught me that no, nothing is ever really finished. Keep asking questions. How can I make this better? How can I make this different? How can I make this more magical? Paul's the kind of guy that's always asking those questions. And that's why he produces crazy, offbeat, unique, magical pieces of astonishment.
Have you heard of the imposter syndrome?
Mm-hmm.
You know what that is? Of course, it's when you see somebody that you've either seen in a magazine or read about or seen on TV,
sure,
and you're afraid to talk to them because you think that they're bigger than you are in some manner.
Yeah.
You don't have that.
Oh.
I was, listening to the people that you've been working with and reading your article. You saw Jeff McBride. You said, I'm 12 years old. I'm going to work with him. You see Gazzo's work. Let's see. I think I'll go work with Gazzo. That's a good idea. You see Paul Harris's work. I think I read about this guy. I think I'll go work with him.
Absolutely, man. Life is too short, man. Why not? Why the heck not? Just go for it, right?
Yeah, that's a great lesson for everybody. If you see somebody you admire, reach out to them, especially nowadays with Facebook messaging and email and all of that. It's so easy to get a hold of people nowadays. There's no reason for the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I've found that most of the time these magicians that are known for whatever it is they're legendary for, they appreciate somebody who comes to them sincerely, who has studied their work and sincerely, genuinely wants to know and learn more. If it comes from a sincere place and you're not like just doing it to get a signature on your book,
right,
or to get a signed photo, somehow like secretly get their phone number or something, as long as you're not creepy and you genuinely have an interest, that's all I did. I just had an interest for greater magic, for greater astonishment. And I guess what it was is all these people kind of saw that and they're like, wow, this kid is really serious. I would like to help him. That's, I think, why I was successful meeting these people and developing a really nice relationship with them.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. You did a TEDx talk, is that right?
Yes, sir.
How did you get that?
I found who was running the TEDx in my town, and I just started pitching the guy what I wanted to do. It took me a while to get a hold of him. Finally picked up the phone and gave me a chance, and we talked. I literally remember this. I was in between classes in community college, call in this guy.
Yeah.
He picked up. I was so excited, and I told him the idea, and he said, I like the idea. Here are my notes on it. Here's my feedback. Here's what I suggest you do to this idea.
Wow.
And come back to me with something more concrete. You know, if you can apply these things and come back to me with something, then I'll consider it. And so I did. So I wrote the TEDx talk. I wrote the outline, wrote the script, practiced the script, learned the whole thing without having to read any notes.
What was the subject matter?
Literally, it was called Why the World Needs Magic Now. It was an educational talk with a lot of evidence about the benefits of magic, both scientific, you know, for mental health, for magic being used in rehab facilities, with people who are disabled and who have motor skill disorders. And magic has been proven a great form of therapy.
Ironically, something happened to you that kind of changed your career, or some sort of a physical thing that happened, right?
I did the talk in 2012, and then the next year, 2013, I was diagnosed with bilateral carpal tunnel syndrome.
Wow. So what exactly is that?
It's a big, long, fancy word for basically a pinched nerve, usually in the wrist area. Bilateral means both hands, not just one. So carpal tunnel syndrome, for those of you who don't know, it's a very common syndrome. It's a very common disorder. A lot of people have it, and it's usually not that serious. It's just kind of a mild case. So most people just ignore it. And when they feel it coming on, they just stop doing whatever's irritating it. A mild case feels like a buzzing or a tingling in the hands or the fingers. And then a more severe case, which is what I had, feels like you're being electrocuted from your fingertips all the way up your arm.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was really, really bad, because you end up losing sleep because you lay down in the bed, and every time you move your arm a certain way, it feels like you're getting zapped, and you're like waking up every time this happens. It started off as a mild buzz, and I would be doing my close-up gigs, and every time I would handle cards or coins, I kept dropping the cards and coins. I just would drop them unintentionally. And then this came on with a greater and greater frequency. And then I remember riding home from some of the gigs, and my hands would start tingling. I'd like have to sit on them, or, you know, shake them off. And like, why does it feel like there's like something buzzing inside of my hand, like a little bee buzzing? What it did was, with movement, any kind of movement or activity, it got greater and greater and greater, until it finally culminated with, I was working a restaurant, and I was going table to table. I dropped the coin a couple times. I picked it up, and then I tried to just put the coin into the other hand, or just do anything in my coin routine. And then the scar tissue, or whatever the heck it was, built up so much to where I just like dropped, everything fell on the floor, and my hands felt like they were on fire.
Oh.
You know, I had a smile on my face trying to present to a table.
Of course.
And nobody knew what was happening, and I just had to excuse myself and pick up the coins off the floor. I mean, you can imagine how small I felt in that moment. I ran to the bathroom because I was in so much pain. I didn't want anybody to see that I was going to like burst out in tears, which is exactly what happened, by the way. I just was like clutching my arms and hands and thinking, what is going on here? What's happening? Do I have this crazy disease or what? I mean, I didn't know what it was. I was younger than I am now. I was able to drive. I had my permit, but the pain was so bad that I needed somebody to drive me back home. I couldn't grip the steering wheel. That's what happened.
Wow.
I said, Mom, I know this is very inconvenient for you, and you're probably doing something. I said, but I'm going to have to ask you to come pick me up, because I can't grip the steering wheel. I can't drive. I can't open the car door. I can't button my shirt. Something's really wrong. So she picked me up, and we both were freaking out. At that point on, we began this epic daily journey of research, trying to figure out what my problem was and how to fix it.
Yeah.
I went to many, many different doctors. I went to a neurologist. I went to orthopedic surgeons, several of them. I went to chiropractors. I went to regular doctors. First part of the scenario was a regular doctor, and all they did was tell me to take ibuprofen. So I was swallowing these huge ibuprofen horse pills, huge amounts of ibuprofen to like dull the pain. That really wasn't getting to the root of the problem.
Yeah.
And then I took steroids. These are the kind that don't make your muscles big.
Bummer.
You can tell by my picture on the cover, the steroids didn't work. These are the kind that, supposed to reduce inflammation.
Right.
And I took a couple courses of that, didn't really help. And then finally, the ortho surgeon, they said, well, if your issue does not go away, we're going to have to perform surgery. Mm-hmm. My heart sunk all the way into my stomach, down to my feet. I said, look, Mom, we got to figure this out. We got to figure out some other way. And she started calling all of her friends, and it turns out on one of her calls, a friend of hers had a daughter who was a professional fencer, where they wear the mask, and it's like a very long sword, and it's this English style where you fight with a sword,
Okay.
like Olympic fencing.
Okay.
Where it's like a mesh face mask, and they're poking the sword, and they're fighting with a sword. Yeah. It turns out that sport, because you're gripping the handle of the sword and doing this repetitive stabbing motion with your elbow, those athletes are prone to getting carpal tunnel because you're gripping for such a long time and you're moving your elbow repeatedly in the same motion over and over again. So they get carpal tunnel, they get tennis elbow, it's called.
Yeah.
So she had kind of the same problem, and she had this form of alternative therapy done. It was kind of like a massage therapy, combined with physical therapy, combined with using tools to literally grind over the area in your hand that has the scar tissue. Basically, I got this form of treatment, and within 1 month, I started getting, within 2 weeks, I started getting my range of motion back a little bit. Within 1 month, I was able to open and close my hand again. Within a couple months, it just got better and better with every treatment. What I found that was the hardest part of getting over this, the therapy-wise, was actually retraining myself how to pick up things and to use my hands. Because I remember one of the ortho surgeons, one of the doctors, he said, whatever you do, no matter how much pain you're in, you got to still keep using your hands. And I said, why, doc? Why? It hurts so much. Why keep using my hands? He said, well, and he kind of tried to evade the question. Well, you just kind of, you're better off that way. Just believe me, you want to keep using your hands.
Yeah.
I realized why he didn't want to answer my question, because I didn't listen to him, because I really was in so much pain. I was just sitting on the couch, like not touching anything, because I was in so much pain. I would just sit there and keep putting ice on my hands. So what happens is, it's literally, if you don't use it, you lose it. And what happened is I had so much muscle atrophy on my hands and my forearms that I lost all the muscle tone, and I lost all of my hand-eye coordination temporarily. My brain was not communicating with the nerves in my hands and arms. When I was getting my range of motion back, when I was trying to pick things up, I would always keep like missing the object. Like if I were to try to reach for a door handle, I know this sounds silly, but my hand would literally miss the door handle. I know that sounds so stupid, but my eyes knew where my hand needed to go, but the connection wasn't smooth enough.
Right.
If somebody were to throw me a ball, a simple underhand toss to catch the ball, I would miss every time.
Wow.
Couldn't shuffle a deck of cards. And that was out of the question for a while.
So did you have to kind of start over and say, well, here's a deck of cards, I'm going to hold them in my hand? And
Yes, I had to relearn the definition of, I had to relearn to tie my shoes. It was really weird. I tell you, John, it was very weird. When your brain knows, you're like, okay, this is how you tie your shoes, or this is how you button your shirt. And then your hands go to try to do it. It's like there's a big disconnect.
And how long do you think it took you to, or are you back? Are you back to where you were when you were young?
Thankfully, I am totally back. I'm 100% back. I'm fine now, thankfully. To get back to full function, it took me about 7-8 months.
Wow.
Of like constantly working it and trying to improve my hand-eye coordination. I couldn't work. I couldn't do anything at the time work-wise. And then also it took me like a whole other year and a half to build up my business back up again because I lost so many jobs.
Well, yeah, because you're out of work for 6 months or a year.
So here's the thing. I really tried to fight it while I was going through it and while I was having treatment. I didn't want to like disappoint my clients and I needed the money. So I said, yeah, I'll do the job. And that was a big mistake. And that's what I will tell you as a lesson to all of your listeners, that there really is some truth to, if you're really not qualified to do the job, you really shouldn't take it because it just disappoints the client. It hurts your name. It hurts your brand. It's not good for you in the long term. So I remember taking a job that I shouldn't have taken. It was a pitiful mess. I was not ready for that. I took a really big corporate gig at the time. I was not fully recovered. I remember trying to learn effects that didn't require me to use my hands and have other people actually do the effect. Kind of was like a blessing in disguise because I'm going to drop another name, not to be like a name dropper, but this is just for real. This is just how it worked out. Promise. This is how it worked out. Paul Harris's sister found out that I was going through this, and that particular year I did not go to Magic Live, and she saw Wayne Dobson there, and she was talking to Wayne about my condition.
Well, for those who don't know who Wayne Dobson is or why he's so well respected, tell us a little about Wayne Dobson real quick.
Wayne Dobson was basically top of his game in the UK. He was like, like the equivalent of David Copperfield in the UK. I mean, he's such a big household name. I mean, I actually talk to people today. Like there's a guy who's not a magician who works at a store that I frequent here in North Carolina. He's from the UK though. And I mentioned Wayne Dobson's name to him. He's like, oh yeah, I remember him. I remember him. I would see him on the telly all the time when I was back home. I would see him on the telly. So, I mean, Wayne had the most TV exposure. He was the most famous magician in the UK. He was a living legend. I mean, he still is. Comedy and magic, the perfect comedy magician, I would say. So Wayne Dobson has this legacy now. At a certain point of his career, was diagnosed with MS, and gradually that kind of got worse and worse and worse to where now he's in a wheelchair full time. He's dealing with the condition of MS. Although I do have to say, with a very good attitude, he's always very happy. And he's always the most positive person in the room, and he always makes everybody smile. And he's a big inspiration to a lot of people. You can see now how somebody with MS, somebody who's really debilitated, more so than somebody who has carpal tunnel, can understand where I'm coming from, being a magician who's losing control of his hands and not being able to use his hands. He found out that I was going through what I was going through. And Janet, Paul's sister, kind of arranged to have Wayne send me some of his lecture notes. And in his lecture notes, it was filled with, I think it was actually called No Hands or something. It was filled with tricks that he does now. And he figured out classic routines and even new routines that doesn't require the magician to use his or her hands. So that came as a wonderful surprise in the mail. That was like a gift while I was going through this. And I always credit Wayne for reaching out and doing that. He's a good guy to do that. And so we've known him since then. That's kind of how I met Wayne Dobson. There you go.
We're going to switch gears a bit and do fact or something John just made up. Sound good?
That's great. Let's do it.
Is it fact? Or is it something John just made up?
Okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to say a headline, and you're going to tell me whether it's true or not. And if it is true, tell me a little more about it.
Okay.
First headline: Shaun met Robin Williams just a few months before he died.
True.
It is true. What happened? Where did you meet him?
So he was going to go on a stand-up comedy tour. I think it was called Weapons of Self-Destruction, which is really funny because shortly after that tour is when he died.
Ironic funny, I guess.
Yeah. Ironically, he was doing his tour. I wanted to see him live because I've never seen him live. And it just so turned out that he was coming through a town that was only 30 minutes from me. Got tickets because, I mean, when does Robin Williams ever come to your small town?
Yeah.
It's like never. He had to cancel because he had his heart problem and he had to get some transplant. But then he restarted again. And then he said, okay, I'm coming back through. And so we made it. So I met him by going to the show and being kind of annoying groupie, doing something like sneakily hiding out around the back where the bus is or something. I pulled one of those things.
Yeah.
And it was, I don't know, 20 degrees outside. It was really cold. And at the time I was just kind of under the weather, and I was all bundled up with like a hoodie, and it was really silly looking. He came out the back door, and I was like, this is my only chance to shake hands with Robin Williams. And I just walked, and there were a few other people there that had the same idea. He was nice enough to stop and talk to the people, and he would shake their hands one by one. And I noticed a break, and I said, now or never.
Yeah.
So I walked up, and it happened.
Next headline, Shaun is a vegetarian.
No, I was.
Oh, were you?
For many years.
How many years?
8-9 years, maybe.
Wow. Is that like until you were 9, or is it some other time in your life?
Something like that. Yeah. It's from early on until I was 9 or something. Yeah.
All right. I just made that up. All right. Last headline.
There you go.
Shaun met Stevie Star.
True.
Now, well, who's? I don't know if I'm old or what. Who is Stevie Star?
Stevie Star is one of the most interesting people you will ever see or meet. He's known as the professional regurgitator.
Oh.
I hope nobody's eating while they're listening to this podcast. But if you are, please stop, because that's literally what he does. He's known for swallowing things and bringing them up. He's kind of a living legend from his many. Seems like all he does nowadays is he goes on one Got Talent show or another. He does a lot of Austria's Got Talent, America's Got Talent, Germany's Got Talent. He won Germany's Got Talent. He's been on all of these Got Talent shows, all these late night TV shows, because he's like the only guy in the world that can do this for real. Crazy, interesting guy.
He eats something, he puts it down his throat, and then regurgitates it. That's his whole act.
Exactly.
That's great.
When you describe it, it doesn't sound like exciting or like somebody would even want to watch it. But the way it worked is we just so happened to be showcasing at a conference at the same time. And I was thrilled. Like, I didn't care about anything else except for just being able to see him perform live, like actually see him do this stuff.
Yeah.
And he brought down the house, because it's not just swallowing stuff and bringing it back. It's very specific. Like, he'll swallow dry sugar from a sugar packet, and then he'll drink a bunch of water, and then his mouth is completely empty, and then he'll like cough, and then dry sugar will come back out of his mouth first into the person's hand, and then cough again, and then he spits up like all the water. That's just one of the things that he does. I don't know how much he'll be working now with the current state of the world with this, this virus coughing into people's hands. But
yeah, probably not.
I know. That's what he does.
Right after this, myself and probably everybody listening to this is going to go on YouTube and go, Stevie Star. Let's see who that is and what he does.
All of us magicians are complaining about the coronavirus. I don't know how you can work around that.
Yeah.
It's almost like become a handicap. You know, you're to be swallowing stuff and bringing it back and spitting it in your hands. I don't think that's what people want to see right now, as cool as it looks. It's a shame, because he's a good guy. He's a really good guy, and he's insanely talented. It's just not timely right now.
Yeah, not right now, or maybe not for a while. I don't know.
That was fact. Or something John just made up.
You have a fan question, my friend. You want a fan question?
Let's do it.
Okay. Every time I interview somebody new, I put on my Facebook group that you can ask me to ask questions of my guest. And here you are.
All right. I'm here. I'm ready for it.
Dean Apple, he's an amazing magician out of Southern California who has a wonderful act with and without his wife, Debbie. Says,
okay,
I've always had a level of respect for street performers because there are so many unknown variables. What was the one thing you liked and disliked most about it?
The one thing that I liked the most about street performing was the rush and the instant gratification. It's really great for feeding the worst part of human nature, which is our love for instant gratification, in the sense that you can go from zero to hero so quick. Let's just say you have a great crowd, a great group of people. You can literally roll up to a pitch, start with nothing, and have no money in your pocket. If you are really good, if you have a great show and you have a great connection with the audience and you're able to convince them to pay you at the end, you can rake it in depending on the circumstances. So it's instant gratification.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite part. My least favorite part of street performing are those unknown variables, in the sense that we think that we are in control lots of times, but we're actually not. One thing street performing taught me, it's like a metaphor for life. You think that you're going to go to this pitch where you perform, and you have this plan in your head, and I'm going to get this crowd, and I'm going to make this amount of money today. And the truth of the matter is, it's not as predictable as that, and there are many possibilities, many things that can go wrong. That's why there are very few professional street performers that make a decent living. They are out there. They've got their game on strong, and I give them so much credit for doing it every day. But it's very difficult to have a set formula every time because of those unknown variables.
So that'd be the toughest part.
It's very tough, yes.
This was fun. I appreciate you joining me here today, Shaun.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me and letting me share my story with your audience.
Oh, it was very, very fun. And is there some sort of social media or anything you want to share with us?
Sure. Yeah, you can find me. I'm pretty active on Instagram because I'm a millennial. That's the hot spot for millennials. Instagram at Shaun Jay Magic, ShaunJay Magic.
Mm-hmm.
And I post photos, videos. I'll be doing some live streams. And then for people who want to learn something and get a lot of value and dig deeper and learn some of the skills that I've acquired over the years, I actually do have a Patreon page. If you just go on Patreon and you just type in my name, Shaun Jay, SHAUN space JAY, you'll find my Patreon page. I will be talking about public speaking skills. I've learned a lot of these presentational skills from street performing and from actually public speaking and doing TED Talks and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I'll be doing some tips and tricks, some podcasts specifically about that, teaching some magic there as well. So that's the best way to support live entertainment, or should I say electronic entertainment right now, because we're all cooped up and we're doing these webcasts. So that's how you can support me virtually.
I'd like to encourage everybody to go to Shaun's Patreon, support your local artists, because this is a time when all of us are having a rough time. And that's the way that you can support us and help us out just a little bit.
Our goal is to make the world a better place.
Absolutely.
One magic show at a time.
And one podcast at a time. All right. Thanks to all my variety artists. And if you enjoyed this, tell all your friends about the Variety Artist Podcast. Thanks again to my friend Shaun for hanging out. I appreciate it, Shaun.
Yes, I appreciate you.
Go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.
That's all for this episode of The Variety Artist, but your journey continues on our website. Go to thevarietyartist.com for more strategies, insight, and resources, as well as show notes on today's guest to assist you in your career. We'll see you on the next episode of The Variety Artist. But until then, go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.